You actually thought he kept you around for love? Oh, honey, look at you. Freya's voice dropped to a terrifyingly calm whisper, her manicured hand hovering near the wine glass. You were the starter wife, the placeholder. But nobody keeps the packaging once they've opened the gift. Harrison. Jimena's voice broke, her eyes searching her husband's face for a defense that never came. Don't make a scene, Jimena, Harrison muttered, checking his watch. Freya is right. You don't belong in this world. You never did. It was the night of the Sapphire Gala, the most coveted charity event in New York City's social calendar. For Harrison Vaughan, this wasn't just a party. It was a hunting ground. He was a man on the precipice of greatness, or so he told himself in the mirror every morning. His tech firm, Vaughan Dynamics, was bleeding cash, and he needed an angel investor tonight, or by Monday morning, he would be insolvent. Jimena Vaughan stood 3 steps behind him, a shadow in a room full of peacocks. She wore a simple, vintage navy dress that she had mended herself. It was elegant, understated, and completely invisible next to the sequined gowns and diamond chokers of the elite. She clutched a small, worn clutch bag, her knuckles white. "Stop slouching," Harrison hissed, not turning his head, a smile plastered on his face as he waved at a potential client. "And for God's sake, Jimena, try to look like you haven't just come from a funeral. This is business." "I asked if we could stay home, Harrison," Jimena said softly. "It's our anniversary. The 3rd one. You promised we'd do something quiet." Harrison finally turned, his eyes cold and hard like flint. "Quiet doesn't pay the mortgage, Jimena. Quiet doesn't get me a seat at the table with Sawyer Armstrong. Look around you. This is the league I play in now. If you can't keep up, stay in the car." He didn't wait for her response. He spun around, drawn like a moth to a flame, toward a burst of laughter near the champagne tower. There, holding court, was Freya Ellington. Freya was everything Jimena was not, loud, vibrant, and dripping in new money. She wore a crimson gown that plunged daringly low, and diamonds that Harrison had likely paid for using the company credit card, the same card that had been declined when Jimena tried to buy groceries last week. Freya was the daughter of a minor oil tycoon, a social climber with sharp elbows and a sharper tongue. She was Harrison's public relations consultant, a title that fooled absolutely no one, especially not Jimena. Jimena watched them from the periphery. She saw the way Harrison's hand lingered on the small of Freya's back. She saw the intimate whisper, the shared laugh that excluded the rest of the room. It was a slow-motion car crash of a marriage, and Jimena was the only one bleeding. "He looks happy," a voice sneered. Jimena turned to see Mayan Oakley, a gossip vlogger who had parlayed a trust fund into a YouTube channel with 3 million subscribers. Mayan held her phone up, the camera lens acting as a barrier between her and humanity. She was live streaming. "He is working," Jimena said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Working?" Mayan laughed, panning the camera to catch Harrison and Freya clinking glasses. "Honey, he's working it all right, just not with you. Word on the street is Vaughan Dynamics is looking for a merger, and Freya is part of the package deal. Honestly, it's painful to watch you hang on. It's like watching a golden retriever wait for a master who moved away." "Excuse me," Jimena murmured, pushing past Mayan. She needed air. She needed to escape the suffocating scent of lilies and betrayal. She found a quiet corner near the terrace doors, hidden by a large fern. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. She reached into her clutch and touched the cold metal of her phone. There was a draft text message on the screen, addressed to a number she hadn't called in 3 years. "He's not the man I thought he was. I'm ready to come home." She hovered her thumb over the send button. 3 years ago, she had walked away from everything, her legacy, her name, her protection, to marry Harrison. She wanted to be loved for Jimena, not for the billions attached to her surname. She had played the role of the struggling artist, the supportive wife, the nobody. She had given Harrison every opportunity to prove that love was enough. Tonight was the final test, and he was failing spectacularly. The confrontation happened an hour later, and it was orchestrated with the precision of a military strike. Jimena had just returned from the powder room, her eyes slightly red-rimmed. She had spent 10 minutes splashing cold water on her face, telling herself she could survive 2 more hours before they could leave. As she stepped back into the ballroom, the music seemed to dip, and the crowd parted. Harrison was standing in the center of the room, holding a microphone. He was flushed, likely from the whiskey and the adrenaline of holding court. Freya stood next to him, beaming like a pageant queen. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harrison announced, his voice booming, "I want to make a toast to the future of Vaughn Dynamics. We are pivoting, new energy, new partnerships, shedding the dead weight of the past to embrace a brighter, bolder future." The room applauded politely. Harrison's eyes scanned the crowd and landed on Jimena. For a second, she thought he might acknowledge her, acknowledge the wife who had typed his business plans until 4 a.m., who had sold her grandmother's ring to fund his first server farm. Instead, his gaze slid past her to Freya. "To partners who understand the vision," he said, raising his glass to the Mistress. The humiliation was a physical blow. A hush fell over the immediate circle as Jimena froze. Freya, emboldened by the public snub, decided to twist the knife. She detached herself from Harrison and walked straight toward Jimena, her crimson dress swishing like a matador's cape. Mayan Oakley was right behind her, phone recording, the red Livy light blinking like a warning beacon. "Oh, Jimena," Freya cooed, loud enough for the nearby billionaires to hear. "You look utterly tragic. Is that the same dress you wore to the Christmas party in 2021? I think I see a loose thread." "Leave me alone, Freya," Jimena said, her voice low. "I'm just trying to help," Freya smirked, circling her. "Harrison is too polite to say it. But you're an anchor, sweetie. A rusty, heavy anchor dragging him down. Look at this room. Look at these people. Do you really think you belong here? You're a mouse in a room full of lions. I am his wife," Jimena stated, though the words felt hollow even to her. "Title, not a job description," Freya laughed. "He's filing the papers on Monday, Jimena. Didn't he tell you? He wanted to wait until after the gala, so you wouldn't cause a scene. But I think you deserve to know. We're celebrating his freedom tonight. Not just the company." The world tilted. Jimena looked at Harrison. He was standing 10 feet away, watching. He heard every word. He didn't step forward. He didn't defend her. He just looked annoyed that she was still standing there. "Harrison," Jimena asked, her voice trembling. "Is that true?" Harrison sighed, swirling his scotch. "This isn't the place, Jimena. Is it true?" she demanded, a single tear escaping. "Yes," Harrison snapped, the veneer of politeness cracking. "God, look at you. You're crying in front of the investors. This is exactly why it doesn't work. You're weak, Jimena. You have no ambition, no drive, no status. I need a power couple dynamic. Freya opens doors. You just stand there." "I loved you when you had nothing," Jimena whispered. "And that's why you'll stay with nothing," Freya interjected, stepping between them. She reached out and patted Jimena's cheek, a gesture of supreme disrespect. "Don't worry. I'm sure Harrison will give you a nice severance package, maybe enough to buy a dress from this decade." The circle of onlookers chuckled. It was a cruel sound, the sound of the pack turning on the wounded. Mayan Oakley was narrating into her phone. "Guys, are you seeing this? The crying wife gets dumped live at the Gala. This is brutal. Real Housewives vibes." Jimena stood there, the tears falling freely now. She felt stripped bare, her heart excavated and displayed for amusement. The man she adored had sold her out for a chance to sit at the cool kids' table. "Please," Jimena said, one last plea to the man she married. "Let's just go home and talk." "Go home, Jimena," Harrison said coldly, turning his back on her. "I have guests to entertain. Prescott will call you a cab." Prescott. The name triggered something. Not Harrison's hired driver, but the name of the man who had raised her when her father was too busy building an empire. Jimena looked at Harrison's back. She looked at Freya's triumphant smirk. She looked at the red light on Mayan's phone. Something inside Jimena broke. But it wasn't a collapse. It was the breaking of a dam. The tears stopped. It wasn't a gradual drying up. It was an instant cessation, as if a valve had been shut off. Jimena blinked, clearing her vision. She reached into her clutch, pulled out a silk handkerchief, and dabbed her eyes with a precision that was suddenly devoid of emotion. She straightened her spine. The slouch was gone. Her chin lifted, revealing a neckline that was regal, almost statuesque. The transformation was subtle, but the temperature in the immediate vicinity seemed to drop 10 degrees. Freya, who was already turning away to celebrate her victory, paused. She sensed the shift. The mouse had stopped shivering. Jimena didn't look at Harrison. She looked past him, toward the grand entrance of the ballroom. She pulled out her phone, her movements fluid and authoritative. She didn't text this time. She dialed. "I'm ready," she said into the phone. Her voice was no longer soft. It was the voice of someone who gave orders that changed stock prices. "Bring them in, all of them. And tell Mason I want the acquisition papers ready in 5 minutes." She hung up and dropped the phone back into her clutch. "Who are you calling?" Freya asked, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. "Your mother to come pick you up?" Jimena finally looked at Freya. Her eyes, previously warm and brown, were now hard obsidian, in a manner of speaking. Suddenly, the heavy double doors of the ballroom swung open with a force that rattled the sconces. The room went silent. Walking through the doors was not a waiter, nor a late guest. It was a phalanx of 6 men in black suits, wearing earpieces. They moved with the synchronized lethality of Secret Service agents. They parted the crowd, creating a wide lane down the center of the ballroom. Behind them walked a man who made the billionaires in the room look like middle managers. It was Sawyer Armstrong. The room gasped. Sawyer Armstrong was the titan of industry, the man who owned half the city's skyline, a recluse who rarely attended galas unless he was buying the hotel. He was Harrison's idol, the man Harrison had been desperate to meet all night. Harrison's jaw dropped. He straightened his tie, panic and excitement warring in his eyes. "Sawyer Armstrong," he whispered to Freya. "If I can get 5 minutes with him." Harrison stepped forward, blocking the path, extending his hand. "Mr. Armstrong, what an honor. I'm Harrison Vaughan, CEO of Vaughan Dynamics. I'd love to—" Sawyer Armstrong didn't even break stride. He didn't look at Harrison. He walked through him as if he were a ghost, his shoulder checking Harrison so hard the younger man stumbled back, spilling his drink onto Freya's red dress. "Hey!" Freya shrieked. Sawyer ignored her. He walked straight to the corner where Jimena stood. The room held its collective breath. Why was the Titan approaching the crying, discarded wife? Sawyer stopped 3 feet in front of Jimena. The 6 bodyguards formed a perimeter, their backs to the center, facing the crowd, pushing Mayan Oakley and her camera back. Sawyer Armstrong, the man who never bowed to anyone, slowly lowered his head. It was a bow of deep, deferential respect. "Miss Sterling," Sawyer said, his voice carrying in the silent room, "your father sends his regards. The family jet has landed. Mason and the rest of the board are 3 minutes out." Harrison froze. The glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Sterling. The name hung in the air like a guillotine blade. The Sterlings were not just rich, they were American royalty. They were the kind of wealth that whispered, while Harrison's wealth shouted. They owned shipping lines, tech conglomerates, and, if rumors were true, a good portion of the federal debt. "Thank you, Sawyer," Jimena said. Her voice was cool, aristocratic. She looked at the man who had just bowed to her. "I apologize for the scene. My husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, was just explaining his views on value and status." Harrison's face went pale. The blood drained from his extremities. He looked at Jimena, really looked at her, and saw the resemblance he had missed for 3 years. The nose, the jawline. It was the face he had seen in Forbes magazine, usually next to her brother Mason Sterling, the ruthless corporate shark known as the Butcher of Wall Street. "Jimena?" Harrison choked out. "Sterling, but you said your parents were farmers." Jimena turned to him, a small, sad smile playing on her lips. "They are. They own the largest agricultural conglomerate in the Southern Hemisphere, Harrison. I told you they worked the land. I never said they did it with a plow." Freya, sensing the shift in power, tried to salvage the situation. "So what? She has a rich daddy. That doesn't change the fact that she's a frumpy." "I would choose your next words very carefully, Miss Ellington," Sawyer interrupted, turning to face her. His voice was like grinding gravel. "You are speaking to the majority shareholder of the bank that holds the mortgage on your apartment, and the primary investor in the network that airs your little social climbing escapades." Freya's mouth snapped shut. "They're here," Jimena said, looking toward the door. If Sawyer's entrance had been impressive, the next arrival was an invasion. Mason Sterling strode in. He was younger than Sawyer, sharp-featured, wearing a tuxedo that cost more than Harrison's company. He was flanked by legal counsel and a man who looked like he broke kneecaps for a living. Prescott. Mason didn't look at the crowd. He walked straight to Jimena, took her face in his hands, and kissed her forehead. Then he turned his gaze to Harrison. It was a look of pure, unadulterated, predatory malice. "So," Mason said, buttoning his jacket, "this is the little man who made my sister cry." Mayan Oakley's live stream comments were scrolling so fast they were a blur. The viewer count had jumped from 3,000 to 450,000 in 2 minutes. The title of the stream had changed from "Wife Gets Dumped" to "Billionaire IRS Reveal, Karma Instant." Harrison stepped forward, his hands shaking. "Jimena, honey, I didn't know. Why didn't you tell me? We can talk about this. I was under stress." Jimena looked at him, and for the first time in 3 years, Harrison saw the sterling steel in her eyes. "We aren't going to talk, Harrison," she said. "We're going to negotiate the surrender." The silence in the grand ballroom was absolute, a stark contrast to the clinking glasses and murmured gossip of 10 minutes prior. The air conditioning hummed, sounding like a roaring engine in the quiet. Harrison Vaughan stood frozen, his hand still half extended toward a wife he suddenly didn't recognize. Mason Sterling didn't blink. He stepped closer to Harrison, invading his personal space with the casual arrogance of a man who owned the building. "You mentioned negotiating, Harrison. But generally, negotiations happen between equals. You are not my equal. You are a liability I am about to write off." I don't understand," Harrison stammered, his eyes darting between Jimena and Mason. "Jimena, tell them about us. We're a team. I built Vaughn Dynamics for us. You built it with my money, Jimena said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a gavel strike. Harrison laughed nervously, a high-pitched, jagged sound. Your money? Honey, you worked as a barista when we met. You mend your own clothes. Sawyer Armstrong stepped forward, opening a leather portfolio he had retrieved from one of the bodyguards. He pulled out a single, thick document. Mr. Vaughn, are you familiar with Aurora Holdings? Of course, Harrison said, sweating now. They're our silent seed investor. They kept us afloat during the liquidity crisis last year. I've been trying to get a meeting with their CEO for months. You're looking at her, Sawyer said, gesturing to Jimena. The color drained from Harrison's face so completely he looked like a wax figure. What? Jimena is the sole beneficiary of the trust that funds Aurora Holdings, Sawyer explained, his tone clinical. She has been funding your little CEO cosplay for 3 years. Every time you failed, every time you overspent on marketing, every time you needed a bailout, she signed the check. She didn't want you to know because she wanted you to feel like a man. She wanted you to believe you did it on your own. And how did you repay her? Mason interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. You used the company credit card, backed by her capital, to buy that rhinestone collar for your pet poodle over there. Mason pointed a finger at Freya without even looking at her. Freya flinched physically. I didn't know, Harrison whispered. The realization was crushing him. The angel investor he had been desperate to impress tonight wasn't a stranger. It was the wife he had just publicly discarded. Ignorance is not a defense, Harrison, Jimena said. She stepped closer, looking at the man she had loved. I wanted to see if you could build something real. I wanted to see if you had character. But you don't build, Harrison. You just consume. You consumed my patience, my love and my money. But the merger, Harrison pleaded, grasping at straws. The deal with Tech Global. If we close that tonight, none of this matters. We'll be rich. I can pay you back. Mason smirked. It was a terrifying expression. Prescott, show him. Prescott, the imposing man standing by the door, stepped forward and tapped his tablet. The large projection screen behind the stage, which was meant to display the Vaughn Dynamics logo, flickered. It changed to a live stock ticker. Vaughn Dynamics, VDYN. Suspended. What did you do? Harrison shrieked. I made a phone call, Mason said, checking his nails. We triggered the bad actor clause in the Aurora contract. As of 3 minutes ago, the board has been dissolved. You have been removed as CEO effective immediately for misappropriation of funds and gross misconduct. The assets are frozen. The merger is dead. You can't do that, Freya screamed, stepping forward. He's the founder. You can't just take his company. Sawyer Armstrong turned to Freya, looking at her with the mild curiosity one might show a bug on a windshield. Miss Ellington, according to the audit we just completed, you are on the payroll as a public relations consultant at a salary of $250,000 a year. Yet there are no emails, no work products, and no timesheets. Sawyer paused, letting the implication hang in the air. That's embezzlement, Sawyer stated flatly. And since the funds stolen were sterling funds, that makes it a federal crime involving interstate commerce. The FBI is notoriously lacking in a sense of humor about these things. Freya's bravado evaporated. She looked at Harrison, then at the exits. Don't worry, Jimena said softly. I won't press charges, Freya. I don't need to put you in jail to beat you. I just need to let the world see you. Jimena gestured to Mayan Oakley, who was still filming, her mouth agape. Keep rolling, Mayan, Jimena said. Get a good shot of the power couple. Harrison fell to his knees. It wasn't a theatrical gesture. His legs simply gave out. He looked up at Jimena, tears streaming down his face. Real tears this time. Tears of a man who had held a winning lottery ticket and used it to light a cigarette. "Jimena, please," he sobbed. "I'm sorry. I was lost. The pressure. You know the pressure. I love you. I've always loved you." Jimena looked down at him. There was no hate in her eyes, only a profound, exhausted pity. "You don't love me, Harrison," she said. "You love the way the light hits you when you stand next to someone shiny. But I'm done being your mirror." She turned to her brother. "Mason, I'm ready to go." "Car's out front," Mason said, offering his arm. As the Sterling family turned to leave, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. No one looked at Harrison Vaughan. He was already a ghost. The limousine ride to the Sterling estate in the Hamptons was quiet, save for the hum of the tires on the asphalt. Jimena sat by the window, watching the city lights blur into streaks of gold and red. She felt hollowed out, as if the adrenaline that had sustained her through the confrontation had finally burned off, leaving only ash. Mason sat across from her, scrolling through his tablet. "You're trending," he said quietly. #1 worldwide. Twitter, TikTok, YouTube. It's everywhere." "I don't want to see it," Jimena whispered. "You need to know the landscape," Mason insisted gently. Maya Oakley's stream hit 4.5 million concurrent viewers before you even left the building. The clip of you saying, "I'm done being your mirror," has been remixed 2,000 times in the last hour. He turned the tablet around. The internet had reacted with the swift, merciless justice of a hive mind. The hashtag Sterling Reveal was dominating. But it wasn't just support for Jimena. It was the forensic dissection of Harrison and Freya. They found Freya's high school yearbook, Mason noted dryly. Apparently, her oil tycoon father actually manages a gas station in Tulsa. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but she's been claiming to be descended from the Rockefellers. Jimena closed her eyes. "It's cruel." "It's karma," Mason corrected. "They built their lives on perception, Jimena. They lived for the audience. Now the audience is booing. You can't ask for the spotlight and then complain when it reveals your flaws." Back at the Pierre, the situation had deteriorated into chaos. Harrison sat on the edge of the stage, a glass of warm whiskey in his hand. The room was empty now, save for the cleaning staff sweeping up the confetti from the celebration that never happened. The investors had fled the moment Sawyer Armstrong mentioned audit. Freya was pacing frantically, clutching her phone. "They cancelled my brand deals," she shrieked, staring at her screen. "Lux Skin just emailed me. They're dropping me for conduct unbecoming. Harrison, do something. Fix this." Harrison looked up, his eyes dead. "Fix it? I don't even have a ride home, Freya. The company car was leased in Aurora's name. Prescott took the keys." "You're useless," Freya spat. "I wasted 2 years on you. You told me you were the next Elon Musk." "And you told me you loved me," Harrison muttered. "But I guess we were both lying." Freya stopped pacing. She looked at Harrison, then at her phone, where the comments were rolling in by the thousands, calling her a homewrecker, a fraud, a Temu Freya. She needed a pivot. She needed a new narrative. She raised her phone, switched the camera to selfie mode, and hit record. "Hey guys," she said, her voice instantly shifting to a tearful, victimized wobble. I wanted to come on here and speak my truth. I was manipulated. Harrison told me his marriage was over. He told me she was abusive. I didn't know she was a Sterling. I'm a victim here too." Harrison watched her, a bitter laugh bubbling up in his chest. Even now she was hustling. "It won't work," Harrison said. Freya ignored him, continuing her performance for the unseen millions. Suddenly, Harrison's phone buzzed. It was a notification from his bank. Alert. Joint checking account ending in 4490 has been frozen by court order. Alert. Personal savings account ending in 8821 has been frozen by court order. Alert. Credit card ending in 1102 has been declined. He was broke. Not just cash poor broke, but can't buy a sandwich broke. And Monday morning, the SEC investigators would be waiting. He looked at the empty ballroom. The grandeur of the sapphire Gala felt like a fever dream. He had held the world in his palm, and he had dropped it to chase a shiny object. 2 days later, the Sterling estate in the Hamptons was a fortress. News helicopters circled overhead, their rotors thumping rhythmically against the glass walls of the solarium. Jimena sat in the library, wrapped in a cashmere blanket. She hadn't slept. The vindication the internet was celebrating didn't feel like victory to her. It felt like mourning. She hadn't just lost a husband. She had lost the version of herself she had tried so hard to build. Jimena the artist. Jimena the independent woman. Now she was just the Sterling heiress again. "He's at the gate," Prescott announced, standing in the doorway. "He says he has papers for you to sign." "Let him in," Jimena said, not looking up from her book. "Mason advises against it," Prescott warned. "He says let the lawyers handle it." "I need to look him in the eye, Prescott. One last time, without the cameras." 10 minutes later, Harrison walked into the library. He looked wrecked. He was wearing the same suit from the gala, now rumpled and stained. He hadn't shaved. The swagger was gone, replaced by a jittery, desperate energy. He stopped at the edge of the rug, as if afraid to dirty it. "Nice place," he croaked. "You never told me you grew up in a castle." "It's a house, Harrison," Jimena said. "Sit down." He sat on the edge of a leather wing-back chair. "I brought the divorce papers. I signed them. I'm not asking for anything. No alimony, no settlement. I want the audits to stop. Please, Jimena. The FBI was at my apartment this morning. They took my laptop." Jimena placed her book down. "The audits aren't up to me anymore. Once Mason found the irregularities, he had a fiduciary duty to report them. That's out of my hands." Harrison put his head in his hands. "Why?" he whispered. "Why didn't you just tell me? If I had known who you were, if I had known you had this kind of power, none of this would have happened. We could have been a power couple. We could have ruled the city." "That's exactly why I didn't tell you," Jimena said, her voice trembling slightly. "Because I knew that if you knew I was a Sterling, you wouldn't see me. You would just see the bank account. You would see the connections." "Is that so wrong?" Harrison looked up, his eyes pleading. "To want to be successful? To want to win?" "It's not wrong to want to win, Harrison. It's wrong to treat people like rungs on a ladder." Jimena stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the manicured gardens. "I gave you a gift, Harrison. I gave you the chance to be loved for who you were, not what you could provide. I paid the bills so you could chase your dream. I cooked your meals. I listened to your pitches. I loved you. Just you." She turned back to him, tears welling in her eyes. "And the moment you thought you found a better deal, a shinier option, you threw me away like trash. You didn't leave me because you fell out of love. You left me because you thought I was low-value inventory." Harrison opened his mouth, but no words came. The truth of it hung in the air, undeniable. "I tested you," Jimena admitted, "and maybe that was unfair. Maybe secrets are poison. I own that. I lied to you every day for 3 years by omission. I'm not a saint, Harrison, but my lie was about protection. Your lie was about exploitation." I can change, Harrison said, though he didn't sound convinced. I can be the man you wanted. No, you can't, Jimena said sadly. Because that man doesn't exist. He was just a character you played until the money ran out. She walked over to the desk and picked up a pen. She signed the papers he had brought, the scratch of the nib loud in the silent room. Here, she said, sliding the papers across the mahogany. You're free. You have your freedom, Harrison. That's what you toasted to at the gala, wasn't it? Harrison took the papers. His hands were shaking. What happens to me now? That's up to you, Jimena said. But I suggest you start by learning how to make your own coffee. Prescott will see you out. Harrison stood up. He lingered for a moment, looking at the woman who could have given him the world if he had just been decent. He realized with a sickening lurch that he had held the winning hand and folded. He walked out of the library, past the shelves of first editions and the priceless art. As the heavy oak doors closed behind him, Jimena finally let out the breath she had been holding. She wasn't happy. She wasn't triumphant. But for the first time in 3 years, she was clean. The lie was over. She picked up her phone. There was a text from Sawyer Armstrong. Board meeting at 9 a.m. tomorrow. We need to discuss the restructuring of Vaughan Dynamics. And Jimena, wear the red suit. It's time you sat at the head of the table. Jimena looked at the message. She typed back. I'll be there. She wasn't the crying wife anymore. She was Jimena Sterling, and she had a company to run. 6 months had passed since the Sapphire Gala, but for Harrison Vaughan, time had become a viscous, suffocating loop of mediocrity. The fall from the penthouse to the pavement hadn't been a tragic, romantic plummet. It was a slow, grinding erosion of dignity. He now lived in a 4th-floor walk-up in Queens, situated directly above a 24-hour laundromat. The humidity from the dryers seeped through the floorboards, making his small, windowless bedroom smell perpetually of fabric softener and damp lint. His wardrobe, once a curated collection of Italian wool and bespoke silk, had been liquidated to pay legal fees. He was left with 2 suits that no longer fit his frame, which had thinned from stress and a diet of instant noodles. Harrison stood behind the counter of Tech Depot, a big-box electronics retailer in a strip mall off the highway. His job title was Home Audio Specialist, a euphemism for a salesman who pushed extended warranties on Bluetooth speakers to people who couldn't afford them. Harry, you're zoning out again, his manager, a 22-year-old named Kyle, with a neck tattoo and a vape pen permanently attached to his hand, snapped from the aisle. Customer in the TV section looking at the OLEDs. Go upsell the mounting bracket. I'm on it, Kyle, Harrison muttered, adjusting his blue polyester vest. It chafed his neck, a constant reminder of his new reality. He hated the name tag. It just said, Harry. No surname, no CEO title, just Harry. As he walked toward the wall of televisions, the 85-inch screens were all tuned to the same financial news network. The volume was low, but the chyron was unmistakable in bold red letters. Breaking. Sterling Foundation announces 500-mit initiative for urban tech incubators. Harrison froze. On the screen, she was there. Jimena. She looked nothing like the woman he had discarded. The mended navy dress was gone, replaced by a structured, architectural white suit that screamed power. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek, severe bun that highlighted her high cheekbones. She stood at a podium, flanked by Mason Sterling and the governor of New York. She wasn't just attending the event. She was the event. She's something else, isn't she? Harrison jumped. The customer he was supposed to help was standing beside him, also watching the screen. It was a man Harrison recognized, a former junior analyst from Vaughan Dynamics named Gregory. Greg, Harrison said. his voice cracking. He instinctively tried to hide his name tag. "It's Gregory now," the man said, turning to look at Harrison. There was no malice in his eyes, only a sharp, pitying recognition. "I work for Sterling Vaughan now. Well, just Sterling Tech since the rebrand. Jimena kept most of the staff on. She actually implemented a profit-sharing model. I bought a house last month." Harrison felt a wave of nausea. That's great, Gregory. I'm happy for you." "Yeah," Gregory said, turning back to the TV. "We all thought she was just the quiet wife, you know? The one who made the coffee. Turns out, she was the engine. We were just too busy looking at you to notice." Gregory picked up a box of headphones from the shelf. "I don't need the help, Harry. I'll just check myself out. Good luck." He walked away, leaving Harrison standing in the harsh fluorescent light, bathed in the blue glow of his ex-wife's triumph. Across the city, in a dimly lit dive bar in the Lower East Side, Freya Ellington was experiencing a different kind of hell. She sat in a sticky leather booth, nursing a watered-down gin and tonic. Her phone, once a portal to adoration, was now a weapon she couldn't put down. She scrolled through her notifications with a manic intensity. Her brand was dead. The hashtag #RTemuFreya had followed her like a digital scarlet letter. Every attempt she made to pivot, fitness influencer, villain-era podcaster, lifestyle coach, was met with a barrage of comments reminding her of the Sapphire Gala. "Hey," the bartender grunted, wiping down the table with a grey rag. "You gonna order another one, or are you just using my Wi-Fi?" "Do you know who I am?" Freya snapped, the old reflex kicking in. The bartender squinted at her. "Yeah, you're the girl from that meme, the one with the cheap dress." Freya flinched as if slapped. She dug into her purse, pulling out a crumpled $20 bill. It was one of the last few she had. Her father's oil empire had been exposed as a modest chain of gas stations, which were currently being audited thanks to the scrutiny she had brought upon the family. Her apartment in Manhattan was gone. She was subletting a room in Jersey City with 2 roommates who hated her. She had tried to write a tell-all book, The Billionaire's Shadow, hoping for a 6-figure advance. Instead, she received a cease and desist letter from the Sterling legal team that was so thick it had cost $20 to mail. The terms were clear. If she mentioned the Sterling name in print, video, or audio for the next 10 years, she would be sued into oblivion. Her phone buzzed. A notification from Mayan Oakley's YouTube channel popped up. New video. The aftermath of the gala. Where is the mistress now? Exposing the fake life. Freya watched the thumbnail, a paparazzi shot of her carrying groceries in sweatpants, looking haggard. She felt a surge of bitter bile. She had gambled everything on Harrison Vaughan. She had thought he was her ticket to the high table. Instead, he was just a waiter who had snuck in the back door, and when he was kicked out, he took her with him. "I should have known," she whispered to the empty glass. "Real money doesn't have to shout." The morning of the New York Stock Exchange. Bell ringing was crisp, the air biting with the promise of winter. Wall Street was transformed into a fortress of security, black SUVs lining the cobblestones like armored beetles. Jimena stood on the balcony overlooking the trading floor, the wooden gavel heavy in her hand. Below her, hundreds of traders paused their frantic shouting to look up. 3 years ago, she had been invisible to these people, a shadow trailing behind a loud husband. Now, she was the market mover. "Nervous?" Mason asked, adjusting his silk tie beside her. "No," Jimena said, surprising herself. She looked down at her hands. They weren't shaking. "I feel prepared." "You should," Mason grinned, checking his phone. "Sterling Tech stock is up 14% in pre-market trading, just because you're the one ringing the bell. The market loves a redemption arc, Jimena. But more than that, they love competence, and you've shown them plenty of that. Sawyer Armstrong stood a few feet behind them, ever the sentinel. He gave a rare, curt nod. "It's time, Miss Sterling." Jimena stepped forward. She didn't look at the cameras. She looked at the digital clock counting down. When it hit 9:30 a.m., she brought the gavel down. The sound was deafening, a clangor of commerce and power that reverberated through the hall. The floor erupted in cheers. Jimena smiled, not the shy, apologetic smile of the past, but a smile that reached her eyes. Later that afternoon, seeking a moment of normalcy, Jimena decided to walk a few blocks to her favorite coffee shop near Trinity Church. Prescott shadowed her from a discreet distance, his eyes scanning the crowd for threats. The city felt different now that she owned her space in it. The buildings didn't loom over her. They stood as peers. She checked her phone. Emails from investors, a text from her mother in Argentina, and a request for a Vogue cover shoot. She turned a corner, distractedly adjusting her scarf, and nearly collided with a man rushing out of the subway station. He was clutching a grease-stained paper bag, his head down against the wind. "I'm so sorry, I wasn't the man started, his voice rough. He stopped. Jimena stopped. The bustling noise of lower Manhattan seemed to drop away, leaving them in a bubble of suffocating silence. It was Harrison. He looked older. The grey at his temples, which he used to meticulously dye, was now prominent and wiry. His skin was sallow, lacking the expensive facials and weekend spa trips. He wore a suit that was clearly off the rack, the shoulders slightly too wide, the fabric synthetic and shiny. "Jimena," he breathed, the name escaping him like a prayer. "Hello, Harrison," Jimena said. Her voice was calm, devoid of the tremor that used to plague her when he was angry. Harrison stared at her. She looked radiant, glowing with a vitality he had never seen. She looked like a masterpiece he had sold at a garage sale for $5. "I saw you on the screens," Harrison stammered, gesturing vaguely toward the giant monitors in Times Square. "You rang the bell. You look incredible." "Thank you," Jimena said politely. She didn't ask how he was. She didn't need to. The frayed cuffs of his shirt told the whole story. "I'm working in Queens now," Harrison blurted out, a desperate need to fill the silence with validation. "Sales. It's a grind, obviously. But I'm leading the regional team in numbers this month. I'm thinking of management soon." He was still doing it. Still trying to impress her with metrics, with potential, with the promise of soon. "That's good, Harrison. I hope you find what you're looking for." She started to step around him. "Wait," Harrison said, his voice desperate. He took a half step toward her, and Prescott instantly materialized from the crowd, stepping between them. Harrison flinched back. "Jimena, please," Harrison said, looking over Prescott's shoulder. "Do you ever think about it? Us? The beginning? Before the money. Before everything got complicated. We were happy, weren't we?" Jimena signaled Prescott to stand down. She looked at Harrison, really looked at him. For the last time. "I think about the girl who loved you," Jimena said softly. "I learned a lot from her. She was kind. She was patient. She was loyal to a fault. I kept those parts of her, Harrison, but I left the part of her that needed you to tell her she existed." "I could have been better," Harrison whispered, tears welling in his eyes. "If you had just given me another chance. If you had told me." "You had 3 years to be better," Jimena said. "You didn't want to be better. You wanted to be famous. And now you are." She nodded to Prescott. "Goodbye, Harrison." She walked away, her heels clicking rhythmically on the pavement, a sound of forward momentum. She didn't look back. If she had, she would have seen Harrison Vaughan standing alone in the middle of the rushing crowd, clutching a bag of cold fast food, watching the only real thing he ever had walk out of his life forever. The sun was setting over Central Park, casting long purple shadows across the city. Jimena sat on the terrace of her penthouse, the wind gentle against her face. Sawyer Armstrong sat across from her at the glass table, closing a leather folder. "The acquisition of the Ellington family land in Tulsa is complete," Sawyer noted, his tone conversational. "We didn't buy it out of spite, strictly speaking. It's a prime location for the new solar farm initiative. But Freya's father was surprisingly eager to sell. He sent a letter of apology regarding his daughter's behavior." "You didn't have to do that, Sawyer." Jimena sighed, swirling her tea. "We protect our own," Sawyer said simply. "And besides, it's good business. The land was undervalued." Mason walked onto the terrace, carrying 2 glasses of vintage red wine. He handed one to Jimena and sat on the railing, looking out at the skyline. "To the future," Mason toasted, "and to the fact that Mayan Oakley is currently streaming a 20-minute apology video because our legal team threatened to demonetize her entire network for defamation." Jimena smiled, but she didn't drink immediately. She looked at her brother, then at Sawyer, the men who had protected her when she couldn't protect herself. "Do you know what the worst part really was?" Jimena asked, her voice reflective. "The humiliation at the gala," Mason guessed. "The betrayal," Sawyer offered. "No," Jimena said, shaking her head. "The worst part was that I believed him. When he told me I wasn't enough, when he told me I was packaging or a placeholder, I believed him. Even with the sterling name, even with the billions in the trust, I let him define my worth. I let a man who didn't know himself tell me who I was." She took a sip of the wine. It tasted rich and complex, like the life she was reclaiming. "That's the real tragedy," she continued. "Not that he cheated, but that he made me doubt my own value. Money can buy companies, Mason. It can buy silence. It can buy justice. But it can't buy the feeling of being enough. I had to build that myself, brick by brick, after he tore it down." Mason put a hand on her shoulder, squeezing gently. "And you did. You stood in that ballroom and you took your power back. That's why people are cheering, Jimena. Not because you're rich, but because you stood up." "I'm ready for the next chapter," Jimena said, her eyes fixed on the horizon, where the lights of the city were beginning to twinkle. No more hiding. No more tests. Just truth. Below them, the city hummed with energy. Somewhere in Queens, a light flickered in a small apartment above a laundromat. Somewhere in a dive bar, a woman argued over a tab. But up here, in the clear, cold air, Jimena Sterling finally breathed free. The story of Jimena and Harrison isn't just a high-stakes drama about a billionaire heiress and a cheating husband. It's a mirror held up to the transactional nature of modern relationships. Harrison Vaughan viewed love as a marketplace. He tried to trade up, thinking he was acquiring a better asset in Freya, only to realize too late that he had discarded a priceless original for a cheap forgery. Jimena's journey reminds us of a critical lesson. Your worth is intrinsic, not external. No amount of validation from a partner and no amount of mockery from a rival can change who you are. Harrison failed the character test, not because he was poor, but because he was empty. And when the truth finally came out, as it always does, karma didn't miss. If you enjoyed this story of justice, heartbreak, and ultimate redemption, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. What do you think? Was Jimena right to hide her identity, or should she have told him sooner? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Remember, the truth always reveals itself, usually when you least expect it. Thanks for watching.